Silencio, silencio. 22 years ago, I stood where I stand now and watched my loved ones die, betrayed by those I had called friends. Vengeance clouded my mind. It would have consumed me were it not for the wisdom of a few strangers who taught me to look past my instincts. They never preached answers, but guided me to learn from myself. We don't need anyone to tell us what to do. Not Savonarola, not the Medici. We are free to follow our own path. There are those who would take that freedom from us, and too many of you gladly give it. But it is our ability to choose whatever you think is true that makes us human. There is no book or teacher to give you the answers, to show you the path. Choose your own path. Do not follow me or anyone else. Hello, and welcome to Visions of the Past. I'm Andrew, the host of this Assassin's Creed podcast. This is episode 26, and I'm going to do something a little different than past episodes. This last week has been a rough week on the world. The protests that have come out of the death of George Floyd and others have brought into light racial injustices that have been overlooked for so many years. Full disclosure, I'm a white male in my mid-30s, and I live in a primarily white community. I'm not perfect, and I might say the wrong thing, but to me, it would be worse to say nothing at all. In this episode, I'd like to use this podcast to show my support for the black community. My expertise is about Assassin's Creed, and so I'm going to talk about ways racism and politics show up in the series and highlight the stories of a few black characters and their impact on the series. If I say something wrong, please forgive me. I'm still learning about racism and would appreciate you calling me out if I say something offensive. In the past few weeks, many people have talked about these injustices on their social media platforms, trying to educate the people of the world to recognize racism and advocate for change. One of those people is Darby McDevitt, the narrative lead for Assassin's Creed Valhalla. He's using his Twitter account to show that Black Lives Matter. One of his recent tweets led to someone telling him, and I'm paraphrasing to clean up the language, to shut up and make our games. You can talk about this to family and friends. Don't bring any politics into my games, especially the franchise I love most. Talk about Valhalla instead of this. There are so many things wrong with that statement, but the one I really want to talk about is his wanting to keep politics out of Assassin's Creed. Assassin's Creed is one of the most politically charged series that I can think of. They create a narrative that looks at history through a lens that shows how wrong things were done in the past. Darby McDevitt was the lead scriptwriter for Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, a game that is set in the golden age of piracy, and it is filled with slavery, and it was never shied away from. One black character in the game is Adewale, who helped the main character, Edward Kenway, as the quartermaster of the Jackdaw. Adewale and Edward bring the subject of the unfairness of the world in their first conversation after securing the Jackdaw, after which they become fast friends, and Adewale becomes Edward's conscience throughout much of the game, trying to guide Edward's actions so that they both work together to further the mission of the assassins. Adewale would go on to lead the DLC Freedom Cry and would have a small role within Assassin's Creed Rogue. In Freedom Cry, Adewale would survive an assassination attempt when the governor of Saint Dominique had no regard for human life, sank an entire ship full of slaves. When Adewale confronted the governor about the loss of life, the governor responded by saying the people on the ship were not even human, and that without the discipline and guidance of their masters, that they would turn to rebellion. This is an example of how black lives were disregarded during the colonial era, and it isn't the only time that it's brought up in the series. In Assassin's Creed 3, there is a conversation between Rutger Haughton and Achilles Davenport about skin color, and how Achilles believes the people's perceptions at the time was that lighter skin is somehow better. Though Rutger Haughton disagrees, that doesn't mean it isn't true. Achilles, being one black man among many white colonists, knows the colonists believe he is a lesser person because of his skin color. Rutger Haughton and Achilles know there is no difference because of skin color. Achilles understands how the colonist thinks and says, what is true and what is aren't always the same. There's another point in the game where Rutger Haughton has a conversation about slavery with Samuel Adams, where Adams would try to convince Rutger Haughton that the colonists were also slaves. Rutger Haughton never lets Adams off the hook, though, and makes sure to keep the issues in his face by telling him that all people shouldn't be equal in turns. People should be treated equally at all times. These two games are not the only places that touch on slavery. Assassin's Creed III Liberation, for instance, has the main character, an assassin named Aveline de Grandpré, as a French African living in New Orleans. She is a free black woman, but worked against slavery by infiltrating plantations and other slave-owned areas, dressed as a slave, to free as many as she could. These three games in particular show the player how slavery, racism, and prejudice were wrong even from a historical standpoint. This doesn't even touch on the modern-day politics the games cover. Assassin's Creed Brotherhood goes so far as to call major political leaders Templar puppets, and show how some laws can allow corporations to throw money at people they want elected into specific offices. Every single game talks about the politics of the time in one form or another. The lead theme of the series, in my eyes, has always been freedom against tyranny, which is something we are now seeing more than ever in our lives. If you're like me, you go back and play these games again and again. I encourage you to really look at how there's at least one moment in every story where a character, usually the main character, is talking about how people should be free and have their own voice. And that, just because our voices are different, doesn't make them any less valid. Like the assassins in the series, we must look at the system that's currently in place and fight against those who wish to control others. Right now, in our world, the people in power are trying to control using racial injustice. But it's our right to choose. You can choose who to follow, what to think, and what actions to take. I ask you to choose wisely and use your voice to stand up for our black communities so that we all may be free. Thank you for joining me today. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday for new episodes. If you love the Visions of the Past podcast, I'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on iTunes. If you have any questions about Assassin's Creed or topics that you would like me to cover, please feel free to hit me up on Twitter and Instagram at visions_AC, and you can find those links in the episode show notes. Until next time, stay safe and be heard.